So thank you everyone for joining us today to discuss the path, or we should say the paths, because we are going to cover it broadly, to partnership. I'm Amy Goldstein, chair of the training programs for the Legal Mentor Network, and I'm also the founder of Grace and Allen, a recruiting and career coaching company for attorneys. For those of you who aren't familiar, the Legal Mentor Network is a nonprofit organization focused on providing free legal mentoring to law students and junior attorneys. You can find information not only about the organization, but also about how to sign up as a mentee or mentor on our network, on our website, legalmentornetwork.org. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as we go along. We'll take them as we go when possible, and we'll leave time at the end. With that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to our moderator, Kim Mallett, for introductions.
Thank you, Amy. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We hope you will find the conversation both interesting and informative that we're about to have. And we look forward to hearing your feedback. I'll be moderating the discussion today, as Amy just said. My name again is Kim Mallett. I am a director in the partner practice group with Major Lindsey in Africa, the largest and probably the oldest legal recruiting firm in the world. As a recruiter, I'm committed to working with people from diverse backgrounds who bring with them their wonderful, diverse experiences and outlooks. And so we look forward to a lively and informative exchange. Before we get started, let's have the panelists introduce themselves. Maybe we can start with you, Michelle.
Sure. Hi, my name is Michelle Callan. I am a partner at Jenner & Block. I've been here for about a year. I lateraled into Jenner as a partner. I'll go backwards. I started my career after clerking. I was at two different law firms as an associate for around 6 years. Then I went into state government. I went to the Virginia Solicitor General's office, starting out as Deputy Solicitor General and then as Solicitor General. From there, I went to the House of Representatives and spent 8 months with the House of Representatives General Counsel's office. And then from there, headed over now to partnership at Jenner & Block. I'm in the Supreme Court and appellate practice here.
Nice. Kyle?
Hi, I'm Kyle Robish. I am a partner at Bradley Aaron Polk Cummings in Tampa. And I started my career as a judicial law clerk for a federal judge in Orlando, and then spent 4 years in Michelle's neck of the woods in Washington, D.C., where I was an associate at Venable before lateraling here to Bradley about 4 years ago. And I was elevated to partner at the beginning of this year, so roughly 2.5, 3 years after my transition to Tampa and my transition to Bradley. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Ginny?
Hi, my name's Ginny McAlmont. I am a partner at Forsgren Fisher McAlmont DeMaria Tisber, which is a boutique litigation investigations and IP firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Like others, I started my career clerking for a federal judge on the District of Connecticut, and then for a judge on the 8th Circuit, which is how I ended up back in the Midwest, which is where I'm from. And then after that experience, I started at a firm called Green Espel, which is another boutique litigation firm, and I was there for about 3 years before forming with a group of partners to open our own shop in January of 2021. That's where I've been.
Nice. And Matt from the airport.
Hey everybody, Matt Schwartz. I'm a partner at DLA Piper. I have been at DLA and the predecessor firm, Gray Carey, for 22 years. I made partner, I think, in 2010. Starting in 2017, I started running my little team that I worked on doing venture and growth stage lending. And for the last year and a half or so, I've been running our whole U.S. finance practice. So hopefully I've got a couple of cool different perspectives on making partner and succeeding as one.
Nice, great. So we'll just lead off with the questions. And one of the first questions that occurred to me with this group was your early career and how that played into your path to partnership. Perhaps Matt, since you're at the airport and you may be getting ready to board a plane, you want to start with that. How did that play into the early part of your career, play into your ascending to partnership, and how has the work-life balance been for you? How has that, because one assumes that there's a lot of work that you have to put in first to get the partner title and then to maintain your practice. So how do you balance that?
The answer is you don't. Work-life balance is a myth. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry for people if that's a tough truth, but that is the reality. Balance implies that there's a scale and you're going to make it exactly balanced, that on one end of the scale you have your work and on the other end of the scale you have your personal life. And that's just not how it works. I much prefer the idea of work-life integration. So that means as a lawyer, you should expect that you might have to take a phone call, do a presentation, send an email at any time from any place, unless you're on your kind of 1 or 2 times a year vacation where you completely check out. The nights are not checked out. The weekends are not checked out. Unless if you're at a big law firm, you should expect that you can take off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go attend to either your family or to go work out or do whatever you need to do, but you're going to dial back in later. So I think that young lawyers should be very realistic about the fact that, you know, as an attorney, if you want to be a partner at a law firm, you basically have to be able, capable, willing of putting in time anywhere and everywhere. The good side to that is if you are the kind of person who does that and your clients know that, you can basically do anything else anytime you want to. You can go to your kid's school and watch their play. You can coach their baseball teams. You can work out any time of the day that suits your schedule generally. So it is a give and a take in the sense that you basically commit your whole life to doing this, but you have big chunks of it that you're able to carve out as long as you're willing to send that early morning email or do that Sunday morning phone call or dial back in and do work later at night. I think in my early career, I was fortunate that I didn't have a wife or kids, and I basically just dove into the job. I started building relationships. I started building my skill set. I learned as much as I could. I stayed in the office late. I volunteered for projects that included travel. You know, I was fortunate then to be able to do that. But I do think that building healthy relationships with your work early on is a key to succeeding. You have to really get comfortable with the fact that this is the life you've chosen, and you have to take all of the good with it, with all of the bad. The key, I do think, for young people is building relationships is the key to making partner. It's the number one key. Every single lawyer who makes partner has, or is up for partner, has a minimum skill set level. You learn how to do the job, particularly in a transactional practice. The key that elevates people to partnership and from, you know, junior to very successful partners is building a relationship, building a network, leveraging that network, being mentored and mentoring, all of the things that are outside sort of the four walls of doing the job of an associate are things that you should start doing on day one. And I was very fortunate as a junior to have some great mentors, some people who pushed me in ways that I didn't necessarily like. And I think that throughout your career, you're going to get pushed by people in a way you might not like. But at the end of the day, you need to appreciate that pushing, unless it's something that's totally over the line or, you know, unprofessional, is healthy for you. Being pushed to a place that's uncomfortable is healthy for you. Get used to being uncomfortable early in your career and being okay with that. That's part of the job. So I think that it's very much connected early in your career to establish a healthy mindset, healthy habits, relationship building habits, and don't get into the trap of just sitting in an office and scribbling away at your desk. You have to get out there, network with your colleagues, network with the partners, network with the clients, find what you like to do with them. If you're into yoga, find your client that likes yoga and go to a yoga class. If you are into nature walks, find a client that likes that. You want to go to a sports event or
Oops. We lost audio, Matt. We can't hear you. You're muted. But it sounds like integrating your practice and your work into your life is a big part of creating that, you know, that long sought after work-life balance that Matt says does not actually exist. Does anyone else want to chime in here on what their experiences have been with regard to either integrating their practice into their lives to create perhaps a work-life balance. Maybe I know that I think Ginny, you came from the government or have worked in the government. Is that something that's easier if you're in a government position, or if you're in a smaller firm? Or perhaps, I mean, Matt's in New York, maybe it's a New York thing, maybe it's a big city thing. Perhaps in a smaller market, it's a different.
I'm in San Diego, so just clarify.
You're in San
Yes.
Diego.
Yep. Which is actually a
But
big market too.
you're
but-
in a big firm,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
You're in a very large
Yeah.
firm.
Yes. Yes. My lens on this is making partner at a big law firm for sure.
Right.
And I definitely think the folks at smaller firms may have different experiences.
I'm a New Yorker, so I'm very New York centric. So sorry about that.
So
But I'd love to hear other people's experiences.
Yeah, so I actually I would guess that I'm at the smallest firm here. We have 10 or 12 attorneys. But I actually agree with virtually everything that Matt said. The way that, and just I did things a little bit differently than Matt. So I have 4 kids. I had my first one when I was a 3L in law school. I had one after my second clerkship, one right as we were founding this firm, and then I just had a 4th in April. So this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And the bottom line is I think of myself as being both a lawyer and having my life all the time, just doing both all the time. And so there's a lot of freedom in that, though. And the way that I have found it most helpful to think about how to do that is to pull back in terms of the time horizon that you consider where you find balance. So if you're looking at it on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to feel like you're balanced. But if you look at it, I think there's 168 hours in a week. If you look at it on a week basis, or in particularly busy times on a month-to-month basis, it's a lot easier to see what Matt was talking about, where, okay, yes, I was, up at 5 a.m. writing an opening statement for a trial that I did last week, and didn't see my kids off to school. But then the flip side is that when the trial is over, then, I picked my kids up from school early on Friday and had time with them. And so it's finding that way of being able to kind of give and take with what you're doing when, and the flexibility that comes with that is just absolutely delightful. And so at this point, I wouldn't trade any aspect of that. So, but it is definitely it's a juggle all the time.
Right.
You hit on a point that it's more of a math point, because I'm a numbers guy, finance, right? Being a partner is about a 3,000 hour a year job. That's just the reality. It's more work than being an associate. It's a lot of hours, but as you say, there's 168 hours in the week. So you spend about a third of your life doing this job, and you spend about a third of it sleeping, and then you've got a third of it to do whatever it is you want: your family, your mental health, vacations, workouts, TV binge watching, whatever you like. So that's how I like to think about it: is third, a third, a third.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to weigh in both on the kind of work-life balance piece and the government piece. From the government perspective, being, having had some time both in state and federal government, I think it really depends what you are doing. Sometimes there's a mentality that in government, you just don't work as many hours. And maybe that's true for some folks. That wasn't true for me. We had a lot of responsibilities. Like in state government, we were the first line to handle pandemic stuff. So just figuring out what an executive order looks like and then defending them. And we'd get sued on a Friday and have to show up in court on Monday. So I perhaps my experience was relatively hectic. And then with the House of Representatives, we were representing the January 6th committee in litigation. So I think that too is on the hectic side for government. But in my experience, my life in government wasn't less hours. It was just, there was a lot more flexibility in terms of how to balance my time. And I think that flexibility exists as a partner as well. As an associate, sometimes you just have less control over your schedule than you do when you're the person managing the case, and you're a little bit more senior. And so I think government in a sense is similar to partnership, where you have a huge commitment, but you have a little bit more flexibility in how to manage your time. And from a work-life balance standpoint, I mean, if I have 2 kids, I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old, if they have a school thing or they're sick or whatever it is, I mean, they have their demands and work has its demands, and sometimes it all hits at once. And I think even the term work-life balance might be a little misleading. I've never found a consistent balance. To me, it's more like, you're riding a seesaw swaying in the wind, and sometimes the wind sways in one direction and you have to balance one way, and other times it sways in a different direction and you have to balance another way. And so you're just constantly swaying in the wind, trying to kind of not fall on the ground. But that's been my work-life balance experience.
So constantly pivoting, constantly reacting to new situations, which, I mean, that's something that I would think a law firm partner with a busy practice is definitely accustomed to. I have another question that maybe Kyle, you want to sort of jump in here. How early in your career did you decide you wanted to pursue partnership? And were there some intentional steps that you took that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question and a good segue, at least in the way I think about it and experienced it from what we were just talking about. I have never been someone who wants to do something halfway. So I think I knew when I got to Venable, and probably even before I got to Venable, I wanted to be a partner at a law firm until I didn't want to be a partner at a law firm, and that hasn't happened yet. So I started thinking about that from day one. And so this work-life integration, which I'm going to be the fifth person to say it, but I agree that's the right framing, right? It's something I was already accustomed to and got used to pretty quickly. And the reason is I knew I wanted to be a partner. And from talking to people who were partners ahead of me, way ahead of me at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to make partner inside my office, right? I mean, I was going to pick up the skill set. I was going to become a very good litigator and lawyer inside the office and also outside of it. But to build my network, to build my, potential book of business, to build my relationships, that I was hoping were going to, become fruitful in year 10. I just started in year 1 and I started early. And so I learned very quickly what that was like to sort of have this, to embrace the unpredictability of the job and of the life. I think that benefited me later on though, because I started it very early and I started doing those things very early. And I'm learning now, I should say, that starting early, doing all of those sort of outside the office things, really paid dividends. And I'm seeing them pay dividends in some ways that I expected and in many more ways that I didn't. Relationships that I just showed up for and did a good job for at the firm have now become referrals. I wasn't even thinking about that 7 years ago. People that I never ever thought would be clients because I was working alongside them became clients, right? All the things that come with showing up, doing a good job, being graceful, being thoughtful, being helpful throughout your life, showing up and being involved in your community, all those things come together. And I think over time, give you the foundation to not just make partner, because I do think at some firms, you can make partner without being a successful partner. Those are different things, right? Set you up to be a successful partner, someone who has a book of business, someone who has a unique set of skills, like a particular value add. I think all of that requires some intentionality, and it requires that sort of thinking more broadly than just your 9 to 5.
And as a litigator, can you talk a little bit about that, about building those relationships with your clients? I mean, because I feel as though we talk about books of business in terms of corporate and transactional work more than we ever do about litigators, because obviously you're not trying to go to court every day, right, with all these clients. How do you build a book and one where the relationships are your own when you're a litigator?
That's a great question. And I could be wrong, and I'm sure Matt will correct me if I'm not, but I think Matt's probably got an easier go of keeping a client for more than one engagement, right? Like they want to do a lot of deals, and if Matt does a great job, he's going to be their guy, right? If I do a great job, a client's like, fantastic, I never want to talk to you again. Not because I don't like you, but because it means I'm being sued, right? And so it does create a challenge. I think I have a much more diverse book of business as a result. And what I mean is in terms of just number of clients, right? I have some clients for whom I handle a portfolio of litigation, but I have many more clients for which I'll handle one-off things or a small number of things. And so it does require me in particular, I feel, to go out and constantly making new connections. Part of that is just by doing a good job, right? If I do a good job for a client, if they have a friend GC who is in a lawsuit, they're going to say, call Kyle, he did a great job. Part of it is by being out in the community and just talking to business leaders and having them think of me if they have an issue. Part of it is just being someone that's a trusted counselor generally. So if someone says, hey, Kyle, I've got a corporate issue, I know you're a lawyer, can you help? I can be like, oh yeah, I've got just the gal for you. She's right down the hall. Diana will do a great job on your deal, right? So there's lots of ways you can build a book no matter what your practice is. And of course, part of that too is work for which I'm not the guy sending the bill, right? But I'm working on my partners is matters, right? And I think you build a book with a little bit of everything. Certainly to start, and then over time you can start to see what works best for you, what work and what clients you like the most.
I think that you hit on a lot of good points there, and something that I really wanted to just pull a little bit on is bringing in work and then, so originating work and then giving it to people within the firm. And how does that then reflect on you? How does that then help you build out your practice, perhaps even your role and the amount of power and respect and regard that you have in the firm?
I think, and I'm probably less qualified to speak on this than some other folks, but from what I can tell, I think the path to greatest autonomy and freedom, at least, is by having your own book of business, right? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of commitment to every single day, right? Every interaction with a person, whether they're your client or not, is an opportunity to grow or shrink that book. But I think if you commit to it and over 10 or 15 years, do the right things, if you're somebody who's got a big book of business, clients that came through you, at least in large part, if not in whole, you have a lot of freedom. You can continue to do well at your firm and command a premium. You can continue to build a team around yourself if that's what you want to do. You can go do your own shop. You can go lateral somewhere else and be very sought after. It gives you a lot of freedom. Now, to be clear, I think that there are also there's another path. There are other paths, I should say, right? Like you can be what I think some people call a service partner, and I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean someone who's a fantastic deal doer or brief writer or case manager, and you need those at firms, right? Big and small. You need someone to do a really good job on the work, and you still trust to run the client relationship, right? I just think that in some ways requires a little bit different of a mindset. Not entirely, because those people still need to be good with the client contacts. They need to be mindful about keeping the relationship person involved and up to date. But I think the first path is certainly the one that can give you the greatest autonomy because you're in command, right, of your own destiny. Whereas in the second path, you do a lot of times, if you don't want to be someone to pound the pavement or build the book, you do need someone to help give you that work, which is fine. That's great. But that is just a reality.
Right. And I mean, we're talking a lot about building books of business and autonomy at firms. And I wonder, Michelle, if you wanted to chime in a little bit here on how, if at all, that affected you when you transitioned from government into a law firm. Because presumably you're coming from government, so you were not bringing clients with you. How has that been for you in that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely still very much in the works. Appellate is almost a heightened version of the dynamic that Kyle was talking about from a business development standpoint, in the sense that an appeal is pretty discreet. If it's done correctly, it's pretty leanly staffed, and then it's a one-off and often goes away for the clients if you've done a good job. And so it's low leverage. So in terms of the way that it works within a firm, it's not the highest, it doesn't, appeals don't tend to bring in a ton of money for firms. They tend to be very prestigious. And a lot of people who go to law school because they want to be constitutional or appellate lawyers. But in terms of the bottom line for law firms, even the most successful appellate partners, it's rare to have a massive book of business that's very profitable for a firm. So being aware of that dynamic, it's definitely, I'm definitely working on trying to both build my brand so that people reach out to me for appeals, doing that both on LinkedIn. That's how Kyle and I met. And I think that the invitation to speak at this event came about. I'm also playing around with Instagram. There aren't many lawyers on Instagram, but I have an Appeals and Heels handle on Instagram to kind of share a little bit of some of this work-life balance, behind the scenes of oral argument perspective. And so, I would love for in-house people to follow me and hire me because they see me on Instagram or LinkedIn. But it's a constant it's a constant effort of both trying to succeed at the firm so that I get work from my colleagues, to succeed externally so that clients reach out, and then to do a good enough job that then when they have other appellate needs, they think to make that reference. But given that they are, it's a pretty discrete kind of set of work, it does make it very difficult to build your own book of business that can kind of feed a lot of people at a law firm and allow you to succeed financially as a partner at a law firm.
Yeah, and given that, what you've just said, was it always your intention, or why was it that you then decided to transition from government to a law firm? Because that's a lot of ramp up that you've got to do.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that a transition from state government back to private practice was as a result of an election. I was a political appointee of the Virginia Attorney General, and when he did not win re-election with his departure, so came mine. And when I was interviewing, I always liked private practice, so I thought, okay, I'd go back to a firm. I never imagined I'd be an appellate lawyer, so that came as a little bit of a pleasant surprise. And then the federal government part just came about because I was interviewing with law firms to be a partner, and the process was taking a really long time. So I thought it would be fun to have some time in federal government, but it kind of it kind of fell in the way that it fell in. And now, maybe if we do this a year or two from now, I'll have some great nuggets of wisdom about how to build a really successful appellate book of business, but I'm still working on that. So, query whether that ends up working out. But I think, like, for folks who are in an area where it's easier to build a book of business, maybe the narrative is different, but I do think there are some aspects to, you're just constantly getting out there, you're meeting people, you're trying to find out what their needs are, and you're trying to connect them with other great people. And then when their needs meet your skill set, hopefully they hire you. To me, that seems to be the trend of how to develop business.
Right. And can you speak a little bit also about why you chose a big firm? Like, how was that process? How did you know well, not even a big firm, how did you know you found the right firm? I know, Ginny, you went out and you created your own firm, and Matt's been at DLA for over 20 years. So how, speak, and please, everyone chime in, feel free to chime in. How do you know that you have found the place where you basically have drawn your line in the sand and you say, I'm here and I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to realize my full potential? If that is indeed what you've said at this point.
Yeah, so
Feel free.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, terrible lighting on the plane now. But I like to tell people, I've made the choice about 6 different times to stay here. I think that it's not inertia. There's been inflection points as an associate, as a young partner, as a more senior partner. You decide to stay at a place many times if you stay for more than 5 years, because partners have great options. So I think it's, once you get to that point where you develop the relationships internally and externally and you make it, it's a constant state of deciding whether or not you're staying or doing something else.
Ginny, feel free to jump in, or Kyle.
Penny, go ahead.
Well, so I've been sitting here thinking about the question that you asked earlier, Kim, about when you decided you wanted to be a partner. And the truthful answer for me is I don't think I ever really did. The decision that I made was that I wanted to be, I had kind of a winding path through law school. And then afterwards, I thought I was going to be a tax lawyer for a hot minute. I thought I was going to be a legal aid lawyer for a hot minute. I did a lot of veterans work. Like, I've been all over the place. And the thing that I eventually figured out is that what I love is trial level litigation, and I love trial level litigation. And so and I agree with Matt, there are inflection points. At every point that I've had an inflection point, the question that I've asked myself is this getting me closer to my goal of being just the most amazing trial level litigator, trial lawyer that I possibly can be? And then I have structured my career choices around that. And the nice thing about thinking about it that way, to Matt's point, is that it is, even at a small firm, even at my own firm, being a lawyer is an insane amount of work. And so you have to you have to wake up in the morning and want to do it. And people are going to want to hire you if they believe that you want to be there and to be doing it, not just because, you know, it's shiny or there's a lot of money or whatever the thing is, but because you love the work and you love the advocacy and you want to be doing what you're doing. And so that's what I think about. And that led me to become a partner. It's possible that in the future that something else would happen and I would do something else then, but it's all going to be in service of that goal that is matched to my passion in this work. And so that's how I think about that.
And how did your passion, I'm sorry, Kyle, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna add on to that, but please, Kim, feel free to take us a different direction.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
I was gonna wholeheartedly agree with Ginny. I think the first question people need to be asking themselves, beyond do I want to be partner, right? That gotta ask that self. Don't just kind of go on autopilot through your career. Is what do I want to do? Because being a partner, like we talked about, it's a lot of different things, not only just in terms of practice, but in terms of like what you want your practice to look like, right? Do you want to be, do you like going out and meeting people and pounding the pavement? Do you want to be a rainmaker in that sense? I think the lines are a little more blurred than that, but is that the kind of thing you want to do? Do you want to be someone who is the go-to trial lawyer at a law firm or at your own law firm? Ask yourself what you want to do, and then the next question becomes, what platform is best for me? Because law firms are just platforms, right? They're different, don't get me wrong, but I think each platform offers you something a little different, right? A super huge national or international law firm is very different than offers something very different as a platform than a super regional small law firm. You can find excellent lawyers at both, but you just have to think about how that fits into where you see yourself in 3, 5, or 10 years. And I wanted to just briefly kind of tie that into some of the questions I saw pop up on the Q&A, which were on some of these things we're talking about building a book of business and how that translates from, you know, the stage from being an associate to partner. I think the big takeaway there, and I think Michelle, I agree wholeheartedly with what Michelle said, building a book of business, becoming a partner who has a book of business is a relationship game. It's a relationship-driven business, and it's about giving yourself as many opportunities to meet people that interest you and that you might be able to help as possible. And that can be law firm general, or excuse me, it can be in-house general counsels, it can be business owners, it can be referral sources, right? There are people who've built an entire book of business on people at their old law firm or people from somewhere else who send them work they can't handle or don't want to handle. There's a lot of ways to do it. Social media, I've gotten several clients, six-figure clients through social media. You can do it a lot of different ways, but it requires intentionality, it requires consistency, and it requires starting early. If you wait until you're a partner or up for partner to do those things, it's going to be too late, at least if that's the version of partnership that you want to push. And the last thing I'll say is, someone asked about billing relationships. Like, how would you continue billing as much as a partner and as an associate as you do as an associate? And obviously, I only have the experience of my time at Venable and Bradley, both pretty big law firms. But in that experience, I'd say you're still required to do the work, right? There are very few partners who truly are just business developers. They exist, but it's taken them a while to get there. And even they usually do some work, actual billable work. The billable hour requirement goes down a little bit once you're a partner, I think, at most law firms. But it's not like you're going to go from 1,900 hours to 500 billable hours. It's more like you'll go from 1,900 or 2,000 billable hours to, 1,500, 1,600, 1,700. And your non-billable hours go way, way up, not just in terms of business development, but in terms of firm management and just general community work. All of those things go into the partnership equation. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to chime in because I think, also we have these metrics that we measure everyone by, right? Not just associates, partners as well, billable hours, origination credit, all these other things. Every firm has different metrics, it has different goals, and you definitely want to be aware of the firm's metrics. You don't want to miss them, but at the same time, I don't recommend navigating your life or your career exclusively based off those metrics, because it's not, your billable hours are not going to be what secures you clients. It's not going to be what gets you those valuable relationships. And I guess if I had one piece of advice to convey to people just generally over the course of their careers, and I think this gets to the question of how do you know that a firm is the right firm for you? How do you know that you should stay at the firm that you're at? I think if you have for me, the one thing that I try to live my career by and just my life by is to surround myself with excellent people. If I feel like the place where I'm working, I'm surrounded by excellent people who are good human beings in terms of just being good people, but also people who are good at what they do. I think good things come of that, right? Like if you surround yourself with excellence, you will learn to grow from the excellent attorneys that you're practicing along with. You will not be put in bad ethical positions because you're working with people who are good human beings and are trying to do the right thing. And if you're at a firm where you're surrounded by great, excellent people, then that's a good sign to potentially stay. If your firm changes and leadership changes or the people you're working with change, and you feel like you're no longer working with excellent people, you feel like they're not really good at what they do, and you're concerned about working with them, or you're not growing, it's horrible, but feel like they're not good human beings and aren't doing things ethically, and you feel like maybe you're looking bad to opposing counsel or to judges because you're fighting over discovery things that you think are just not the right thing to do, then that could be a signal that it's time to look for other opportunities. But I think if you if you surround yourself with excellent people, that's a good mantra to have, and it puts you in a good position to succeed.
Mhm.
I could also just chime in and underscore something that Kyle said about referrals. So referrals are a huge part of business generation, I think, especially at smaller firms, just because big firms get something that they can't handle because of a conflict issue or because it's just not the right fit, but they have the relationship with the client. They want to send that piece of work somewhere else, but also trust that, you're not going to try to poach the person forever. And so when you're starting out, when you're early in your career, it's not always the easiest to know how is it that I'm going to, end up at a lunch meeting or a football game with GC of X company. But you do know other people around you, other lawyers at the firm that you're at other firms in town, at, people that you went to law school with. You can cultivate those relationships, and it might take time for those people to turn into people who refer work, but that does happen. And so to Kyle's point, you have to start that early. You have to be diligent about maintaining those relationships. And I really think you have to be authentic in how you do it too. People need to believe that you're doing it because you care about them and the relationship, and not because you're out for whatever thing they can give you later, which speaks to, even though it's impossible to fit things in, find the bar organization that's working on whatever thing you are genuinely passionate about, so passionate about that you will take an hour once a month to be at that meeting instead of being with your kids or doing a billable hour. Show up in that way. And again, do it in a way that's authentic and consistent with lawyers as well as with folks who are in businesses. And that definitely pays dividends down the road. And that's something that everybody can do from day one at a firm. You don't need to know where the GC is going to go eat lunch to be able to have that kind of work.
Yeah. I mean, I saw that one of the questions, and I think Kyle, you addressed it a bit, is about what we mean when we say relationships. And I guess that in the conversation, I think we may have lost Matt. In the conversation, we've used it sort of interchangeably, right? So we've talked about relationships in terms of building your book, meaning your clients, right? The people that you do the work for. And we've also talked about, Ginny, you just talked about the relationships that you've had with people who may never bring you business, but it's important to have those as well. And I want to also talk to you about the mentor relationship, right? This is the Legal Mentoring Network. So what about that? How have you mentored people in your current positions or even before? And how were you mentored, and how did you find it? I'm assuming it was helpful to get you to where you are now.
I'm happy to take a stab to get us started on that. But before I do, I want to briefly add an exclamation mark to what Ginny said. for all of you out there who are wondering, how the heck am I going to get business? I don't know how I'm going to do this. This doesn't make any sense. I don't know any Fortune 500 GCs. The first clients I ever got were when I moved from Venable in DC to Bradley in Tampa. And they were from a referral from someone who was the hiring partner at Venable back in my days at Venable, and I worked on the hiring committee with him. Didn't actually do any substantive work for him because I just wasn't that kind of lawyer. He was a government contracts lawyer, and that wasn't me. But I just showed up and did a good job on the hiring committee with him. I really liked it. It was great. It was my favorite things I've done. And I moved to Florida, and Venable at that point didn't have an office down here. And he was just thoughtful about sending things my way that they needed, help with in Florida. I didn't know those GCs until he connected me with them. And when I got to know him at Venable, I was not at all thinking about this ever happening. But it's just a way in which, showing up consistently, authentically, and in ways where you don't know where the relationship's going to go, often pays dividends and can give you business, even back then when I was an associate. But to answer your real question, Kim, I think that we sometimes get hooked on mentorship as like this formal thing. And I think that the most effective mentorship is informal. And that's why I love the Legal Mentor Network, because it takes people who've never actually met and says, hey, let's put you together and see how you can get to know each other and talk to each other and benefit each other. And so, for example, I mean, in every firm I've worked at, I've had a formal mentor and mentee, right? And sometimes those are a good match, but sometimes they're just, people that the firm puts together just to put people together. The most effective relationships are the ones that I've enjoyed the most and benefited from the most, are ones that sort of occurred naturally. So to take an example of Venable, there's a partner who I thought was one of the best legal writers I've ever worked with. And I wanted to be a really, really good legal writer. And so I also just liked his life philosophy. And so I attached myself to that. And I said, hey, can I do work with you? I'll do anything you need. Let me know what I can do to help. And over time, that just turned into a sort of mentor-mentee relationship. I don't know that we would call it that if we were in a room together, but that's really effectively what it was. And on the flip side now as a partner, I mean, there's still a lot of people who I look upwards towards, right? More than not. But there's also a lot of folks where the shoes under their foot. And I try to be intentional about just working with people, meeting them where they're at. So if it's a junior associate, and we're talking about a matter, saying, hey, this happened earlier today. I want you to tell me what you think we should do. I have some ideas, but I want you to kind of take ownership of the case, and let's talk about that. And then let's unpack it, right? And we did, right? Well, think about this business consideration. I know you're coming off a clerkship, so you're thinking very legally, and that's important, but there's a business component to this too, and here's what that means. Taking the time to explain things, show up, just be intentional about not just assigning work and checking the boxes, but actually trying to add value to the relationships and explain the why. I think once you're a partner, it goes a long way. And if you're an associate, ask those questions. Don't be afraid to. And if you find attorneys who are willing to sit down with you and answer those questions and give you opportunities and explain the why to you, attach yourself to those people, because they're the ones who can take you, I think, far in your career.
And have you found that it's more effective with you sort of reaching out to people, or have you had instances where, and this is for anyone, where people have reached out to you and said, hey, Ginny, I noticed that you did a really good job writing, doing the first pass on this. So I want to show you how this could be even better.
Yeah, I definitely think, especially when you're starting out, like something that I wish that someone had told me more directly is like people who are, senior to you want to be helpful. Everybody likes to feel helpful. So it is okay to make asks of people, but you should take initiative to do that. And you should do so in a way that is respectful, which is to say that, like, I think that what Kyle just said is a perfect example. When something happens in a case that you're working on, and find the right moment and say, hey, why did you do this way, not this way? And then people are often very happy to explain their thinking, as long as you pick the right moment, and then you can grow from that. But it's on you to make the ask. People don't necessarily think to, go. Some do, but not everybody thinks to explain what's happening. And those kinds of specific asks for, can you give me feedback on this, or can you explain why you did that, or can we go get lunch and just chat for a little bit about this legal market and, how you think about it and how you thought about your career. Those things are a lot better than, you know, just a request to like, hey, can you mentor me? Because the title doesn't mean anything. It's the actual relationship. And so you should build the relationship. And I do think that as a mentee, you should take initiative for building that relationship, as opposed to, you know, the reality is that if you sit around waiting for senior partner at firm to you know, reach out to you and say, hey, do you want to go get drinks? It might not ever happen, but they might be willing to do that again if you take initiative to put in the work to have that relationship.
Michelle, you had something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really excellent advice, because, you know, there are some people who keep their head down and do good work and then make partner and develop clients. And I guess that works for them. That's never worked for me in my career. I've also never had a situation where someone just voluntarily came up to me and they're like, I want to take you under my wing and, you know, help you build your career for you. The relationships, and I think to me, maybe that's the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. A sponsor is someone who takes it of their own initiative and wants to help you succeed, and that's something that they affirmatively want to do. Whereas a mentor is somebody who's receptive when you reach out to them. And if you're lucky enough to find a sponsor, that's fantastic. I've built my career off the backs of mentors. And it's very rare that somebody says, no, I don't want to help you. Occasionally they get so busy they don't respond to their email. But I found even there, sometimes if you know, they know that you emailed, they know that they owe you a response, and then they feel guilty, and then they're more likely to respond the next time. So I think if you just take the initiative to develop relationships with people, and just because somebody is prestigious or perceived as important, if you don't click, you know, and then relationship doesn't come naturally, then prioritize the ones that do come naturally, that you have those connections. And also don't think that just because you're more junior, you can't help them. So I saw a question in the chat about, as a law student, what can you do? I actually think there's a lot you can do as a law student, because a mentorship relationship isn't just one where the person senior is only helping the person junior. The person junior can do a lot to help the person senior, and you build a lot of goodwill by helping the people senior to you. So you can always nominate someone for an award, right? Like if you see an award come through, nominate the person who's taken you to lunch, you know, as a mentor. And you can say, just wanted you to know, I really appreciated your advice and I've nominated you for this award. Even if they get it, they'll always think of you. If they don't get it, they still think positively about you. And as a law student, there's a lot you can do. If you're part of a student group, put together a panel and invite the person to speak on the panel. If they come out, then go to lunch with them, offer to cover the lunch, even if they make more money. They'll probably say no, but they'll think positively about you because you've gone out of your way to be helpful to them. And so I think that there's a lot that you can do to help the people who have been good mentors to you as well.
I want to say I love those examples. I think the common thread to everything Michelle said, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, is like authenticity and consistency, right? So those are all like authentic gestures you can take to somebody to say like, hey, you matter to me. Hey, I value our relationship. So, you know, the award nomination example is such a good one. But it can be as simple as, hey, someone that is a mentor to you informally, or someone that you look up to, you saw on LinkedIn they got a promotion or switched companies, sending them a message and saying like, hey, congrats on that. That's awesome. Would love to sit down with you and talk about it once you've had an opportunity to kind of get settled, right? It's a thoughtful gesture that says, hey, I'm thinking about you, I'm paying attention to you, and I think you did something cool and I want to tell you that. Those little touch points over time, as long as they're authentic and genuine, make all the difference in sustaining and building relationships.
As a law student, there's you can get involved in bar associations in various ways. So like I currently have two mentees, one from the Minnesota State Bar Association's appellate practice group, one from Minnesota Women Lawyers, which is an organization I'm very involved in. So there are like mentorship programs like that you can seek out. But also, I think something that I didn't appreciate as a law student is Minnesota Women Lawyers. Like I said, that's an organization I'm very involved in. You can be a member as a law student. You can go to all the events. You can join a committee. Often there's, you know, reduced fees or waiver of fees for membership. I think that's especially helpful if you're in a market like the Twin Cities. You know, the Twin Cities has a few law schools. And so a lot of folks who come here end up staying here. And so if you're in a market where you know this is the market that I'm going to be in, you can start being involved in those organizations as a law student, start building those relationships early. And that can be a very good use of time, in addition to helping you find people who are on paths that you find interesting and that you think you might want to follow, and then being able to talk to them about how they got where they went, which is all to the good for you finding the thing that you're going to feel passionate about when you wake up in the morning.
Mhm. And then I guess one final question from me that I was wondering how you're all litigators. How did you arrive at that practice area? How did you choose that as your focus? And how did you then package yourself? I know, Ginny, you were a partner and then you started your own firm. And how did you package yourself as a litigator within big law, or within a law firm that you did not create, that made you an attractive commodity for clients, and for Kyle and Michelle, going from the government to big law, and switching, I don't know, you switched markets, right, Kyle? When you switched firms, going from Venable to Bradley, how did your practice area and who you were, what you had done within the firm, help you, do you think, or support those shifts?
Yeah, so I wanted to be a litigator ever since high school. My mom forced me to do debate, policy debate, and I said I absolutely not. And then I did it, and she was very correct. It was the right thing for me. And then that turned into what's the most like this later on, and it was the law. Then I went to law school. I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. And a lot of people around me didn't feel the same way, so I knew it was probably in the right place and generally in the right field.
Mhm.
And to take the question about changing markets, because I think it's a really good one, Kim. It was a challenge and an opportunity that kind of at the same time. It was challenging because here I was, this like senior associate-ish person who was changing markets from DC to Tampa, changing firms from Venable to Bradley, and at sort of like a near partnership decision point, right? So it was stressful. I had to go somewhere that I was hoping I could, make partner and not have it delay that too much. But I also had to do a lot of things to make it so it made sense for me to be partner, right? And so that was the challenging part. The opportunity was, and I think it played out more. The opportunity, outstripped the challenge at the end of it. I saw that the transition did a lot for me. So one, I brought a lot of really good experience from my time at Venable to my new job. And I made it so people could tell right away I knew what I was doing. I could captain a case. I could write well. I could think well. Okay, great. So I got a lot of trust very quickly. Whereas on my first job, it took more time. But it also created opportunities like the one I mentioned before, where I was starting now to get referrals, or be like, at my firm, I was hired to be the next commercial litigator, right, in our office. When you put those two things together, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm getting business. This is kind of cool. But it wasn't always in ways that I thought it would be, or avenues that I thought it would be coming through. And so that was the opportunity side of it. And so it ended up working out. I made partner in a little under 3 years, which is a little unusual in a good way. So I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. But I just had to embrace those challenges and kind of turn them on their head and say, how can this be an opportunity? Well, you know what? My old law firm, I have a lot of great relationships there, and they don't have an office in Florida. I bet I can do a lot of stuff for them. And I could, and it worked out really well for me, right? Hey, my new law firm has this environmental group. I used to just be a full-time environmental litigator. They don't have anyone in Florida. I bet I can be the Florida environmental guy. And that's part of what happened, right? It's just looking at your new circumstances and saying, how can I turn this challenge into an opportunity? And it largely worked out. Obviously, it wasn't smooth and there was a lot of stress along the way, but the mindset helped.
Running out of time, I'd love to hear what Ginny and Michelle have to say about the same question.
I figured out that I wanted to be a litigator by doing a lot of things that weren't litigation, and then just being very honest with myself, introspecting on what is it that I am gravitating to and gravitating toward and why. So my first summer after law school, I worked at a criminal justice policy shop, amazing organization. Policy was not for me. My second summer, I split between a big firm in New York and DOJ. Both focused on tax, loved it, but also thought, well, maybe I don't want to do tax. And it wasn't until, again, there were many versions of this along the way, many things that I did not do. But where I ended up was clerking at the district court and being in the courtroom and watching people and thinking that's what I want to do. And so again, you have to try a lot of other things sometimes to find out what isn't what you want to do. And I think the key though is, as you're trying those things, I think you have to be really honest with yourself and introspect about what is it that I am gravitating toward and why. And that has to set aside other people's expectations for you, what's shiny, what other people think you should be doing. And again, really be focused on you and your honest self and what it is that's going to sustain you when you're writing a brief at 10 p.m., as I know all of us have done. When you hit that moment, you want to be in the place where you feel like that's something that's worth doing, as opposed to something that you're only doing because you have to.
Yeah, and just to kind of end, hopefully on a positive note, in some ways I knew I wanted to be a litigator, but fell into appellate litigation. My law school had an appellate clinic, and there was an oral argument opportunity over Thanksgiving, and so I thought that would be fun. So I kind of gave up my Thanksgiving break to prepare for a Sixth Circuit argument and got to argue my first appellate case as a law student, and then kind of caught the appellate bug. And I think the theme for me, part of how I've been able to develop an appellate practice, even though I didn't go to one of the 3 law schools that in theory you're supposed to go to, in order to be an appellate lawyer, and I didn't have a Supreme Court clerkship. But it's just when amazing opportunities came my way, I kind of was open to dropping everything to do them, to join the Virginia SG's office. My husband had a job in Baltimore. The SG office job was in Richmond, Virginia, and we had a kid in preschool in DC, and we figured out a way to make it work. And so at least what works for me is, as an amazing opportunity comes about, to have the supportive infrastructure around me to kind of drop everything to do what's right for my career has really opened doors. I know that doesn't work for everyone, but that's how I ended up an appellate litigator.
Thank you. Thank you all. Amy?
Kim, thank you. Michelle, Kyle, Ginny, thank you for joining us, for jumping in at the last minute for Caitlin Rose. And also, of course, thank you to Matt, who is not only a partner, but also is a co-founder of the Legal Mentor Network. If you noticed, he dropped off, his plane was taking off. So that was what happened there. This has been such a great discussion. I really, on behalf of the audience, thank you so much. There is upcoming programming for the attendees. If there is anybody who is in an LLM program or is a foreign trained attorney, we had a terrific panel in September. They are back next Tuesday, November 7th, for a Q&A session. So please join us for that. And if you're not quite sure about partnership and you want to learn about the path to in-house, we will have that coming up in January on the 17th. So keep an eye out for other programs in the future. Join the Legal Mentor Network if you're not already a part. And again, thank you, Kim, for moderating, and to our panelists. This was terrific, and everyone have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.